Hey everyone, Kathy the Vegan Prepper here with a video all about zero waste living and how that relates to prepping specifically. And just like in general, zero waste and low waste living it's basically a style of living where you try to create as little trash as possible. Some people get really extreme and like they only make one jar of trash like in a whole year. We are definitely not there, but we do produce far less waste than we ever used to. And incrementally, we produce less and less waste as we move forward. So I would just sort of like to talk about that again, relating specifically to prepping, since a lot of the videos that I post on this channel are about zero waste living. And sort of try to connect those two things and how they go together, at least in my mind. So for one thing though, I think a lot of people think of zero waste living or low waste living as something that's actually relatively new, like something that people are only just discovering. And I think a lot of times we like to think that we have invented everything, modern people, but really this is the way that people just used to live. Like our great grandmothers and grandfathers, like this was just life, right? I think of like the first example that comes to mind were like the milk bottles. Like the milkman would deliver the milk bottles and then they would be used and they'd be washed or whatever and sent back. So like he'd pick up the milk bottles from the previous day, deliver the new milk, and then those bottles would go back to the factory and get sanitized and then reused. In fact, a lot of soda companies used to have that same kind of policy where the bottles, if you brought them back to the store, I remember even doing this as a kid in the 90s. Does anybody remember that? Like if you brought a bottle back to the store, you got like 5 or 10 cents for the bottle, because there were still some companies that were practicing washing, sanitizing, and reusing the bottles even as recently as then. And so when you think too about the way that people used to live, they did not use paper towels. They weren't using disposable diapers. Foods were packaged in things like cardboard boxes. Meats, when people bought meat, they were wrapped in paper instead of being shrink wrapped in all this plastic. It was like a lot less waste. And really, when you look at it, the problem with our society now, as far as the waste, is really tied up in that plastic and that single use plastic specifically, and how ridiculously harmful it is to the environment. It's filling up our oceans, it's creating landfills. It's a huge issue. And I think a lot of people I guess it's kind of like, not to have a vegan moment, it's kind of like the issue with animal agriculture and all of that. I think people don't like to realize how large scale an operation it is. And just how many billions of animals are killed every year for human consumption. It's a massive number. And it's the same thing with the plastic. And I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just trying to say, like, this is kind of like the reason why I am passionate about this, is to try to just reduce, I don't want to say reduce my carbon footprint. That's like such a, I don't know, like a buzzword that doesn't really mean, people eye roll at that now. But really, it's trying to kind of shift the compass point to something that is a little bit more sustainable and a little kinder to our planet, and then ultimately kinder to future generations, because I think we can't just think about our own survival and our own living on this planet. Like, we have to be thinking about our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and going on and on and on, because we as preppers, we kind of have this, I don't know, like, reputation, I guess, that we're like preparing for some apocalypse or something, but it might not happen in our lifetimes, some sort of world ending event. And so we need to make sure that everything is as good as it possibly can be for as long as it possibly can be. So anyway, getting specifically to the prepping and the zero waste thing. So for me right now, my preps specifically are not being focused right now in the zero waste realm, even though I did just say, single use plastic and stuff is an issue. For me right now, especially because we were starting to get our food preps together late, kind of coming to the game a little bit late. So a lot of my food preps have things that I'm not normally super thrilled about. And so like single-use plastic, things like that. Although I did manage to get some, I put juices in our preps, I got canned juices instead of plastic bottled juices. So I did manage to do that, things like that. So I've made some decisions here and there. Now it is entirely possible to prep a lot of things, especially like dehydrated foods, into jars and vacuum sealed jars instead of, say, using a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. However, we don't have Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers yet, and jars are too precious right now. Have you been trying to find jars lately? Nobody can get jars right now. Thank you, Rona. But you know, it's just kind of too precious right now. So right now we're having to use kind of more wasteful ways of prepping. Now, what's one of the great things about Mylar bags is, though, they are actually reusable. You cut the top off and you get into it, or you open it or whatever, you can reuse that bag until there's like nothing left. You just reseal it, and you can just reseal it until the bag becomes like, you know, a little rectangle. And so you can get many uses out of one of those, so they are not as wasteful as they seem at first. So that's something to keep in mind. But really, like I said, our preps are not so much focused on the zero waste thing. Really, right now, our focus is on living zero waste as much as possible and making those choices as much as possible so that we are set up. And I think it ends up setting us up very well for things like quarantine. I feel like quarantine didn't hit us as hard as a lot of people, and I think a lot of it is because we were already practicing a lot of this stuff. And so let me kind of get into that. I did talk about keeping our planet good, being concerned with future generations and their survival and the state of the planet for my own children and my own grandchildren, making sure that everything is set for them. Speak of the angel. Hello. Hi. That's so funny. That was totally unplanned, but you need to kind of go now again. All right. Okay, here, just a second. Oh my gosh, that was perfect. Okay, keeping everything nice for future generations. But also it's about developing skills. And this is what I was talking about, where I think a lot of things didn't hit us quite as hard in quarantine as some other people because we already had skills. And I have been doing this for like a really long time. So I've said many times, my original kind of getting into zero waste was not about zero waste, because that wasn't even like a term that was around then. My original motivation was saving money. I was tired of buying things over and over and over again, like Ziploc bags, like paper towels, like napkins, like tired of spending my food budget on these items that were just getting thrown into the trash can. Now, I have not moved to family cloth yet. We still use toilet paper. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get there, but things like that. But also, I call it my brownie mix moment. There was a moment early in our marriage when I was still like 20 and learning how to set up our house and keep house and all of that. And I was buying these little brownie mixes to make these, brownies. We were not vegan. They were definitely not vegan. And so they were like 88 cents. And I just remember that very distinctly. They were 88 cents at Walmart, brownie mix baggies. And I'd buy, 2 or 3 of them, and then we'd run out. And I'd be frustrated because I was like, oh no, I wanted to make brownies and now I'm out. And so I was like, I bet you could make brownies without a mix. And it was like, at the time, revelation, right? Mind blown. So I learned about flour and cocoa powder and all of that stuff. But like I said, it was very young. I was never taught these things growing up. And I had to basically learn how to cook from scratch by myself before YouTube existed, when Google was barely a thing, and when our internet was still dial-up, okay? Talk about the dark ages. But I'm not gonna get into that right now. But anyway, I learned how to cook and how to put ingredients together. And from a very young age, as a very young housewife, I was actually still working at the time, but still as a very young mom and wife, setting up my home, I began to focus on stocking ingredients and not finished products. So that was kind of the very beginning of all of this for me, way back then. And so learning how to keep ingredients on hand so that I could make what I needed from the ingredients I had on hand rather than having to rely upon a store-bought mix. And like suddenly I can't make brownies because I don't have the bag of mix. That's ridiculous. So I learned, so you can learn how to make your own things and ingredients. So you can kind of go into your pantry right now. Well, maybe finish the video first, but you can look in your pantry and see later some of the things that you have that are like in a box, in a thing that's like a prepackaged thing that came from the store that probably has a bunch of plastic inside, spice packets, and all of that stuff. So like the thing that just blew into my mind right now was, say, like Rice-A-Roni. You can make your own Rice-A-Roni mix if you really want to make something like that for your family, even like a hamburger helper mix, things like that. These are things that you can create from what you have on hand if you stock the separate items, which you can purchase in a zero waste way pretty easily. It's really easy to buy zero waste ingredients, but not so much to buy, chips. That's like a really hard one to do. So I have some ideas, for instance, the things that just kind of came off the top of my head when I was making notes for this video. Knowing how to make your own granola, for instance. Don't have granola in packets from the store. Buy your own 25-pound bag of oats packaged in a big paper bag, which you can compost or turn into mulch in your yard or whatever. Have the oats on hand, the dried fruits that you can buy in bulk and whatever, maple syrup and all that stuff. Some people are lucky enough to be able to buy liquid items. I haven't found a liquid source of maple syrup yet, just to be able to like put it in my own container, things like that. But you get the gist of it, right? Bulk seeds and nuts that you could put into your granola. Learn how to make your own granola, right? Learn how to make your own nut and seed butters from seeds and nuts that you buy in bulk. Make your own toothpaste. It's very easy to do that. Now, I will say my husband does not use a homemade zero waste toothpaste because he hates every single homemade zero waste toothpaste that I make, and he's picky as heck. And when I tell him you are picky as heck, he says, "How do you think I got you?" And then I'm like, "Oh, you're so sweet." And so then he gets away with it, but he's picky as heck, so he does not use it. But I don't mind. I use a homemade zero waste toothpaste and it's great. And I actually think that it helps remineralize my teeth. I can't make specific claims, specifically, but I really do believe that. Because I've been to the dentist and the dentist was like, "Wow, you had some cavities starting, but they're starting to grow back. So just keep using your fluoride toothpaste and flossing." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I use a fluoride toothpaste." Yeah, sure. Anyway, but seriously, if there were some issue, everything was out, say things got insane, you weren't even allowed to leave your house, and you ran out of toothpaste, what are you going to do? Well, if you've got baking soda on hand and you got like some coconut oil, you can make yourself a toothpaste. So go learn how to make yourself a toothpaste, a very simple one. And then you can still stay up with your oral hygiene, even if SHTF quarantine, like a real quarantine happens and all of that, which is still not, I think, out of the realm of possibility that you could like genuinely get trapped in your own home. So anyway, your ferments, sauerkrauts, vinegars, your own kombucha, things like that, fizzy drinks, things so like not depending upon soda from the store or, even sparkling water, which is kind of a weakness of ours. We love sparkling water, but you can make your own fizzy fermented drinks at home if you kind of look into that as a replacement for your soda, and then you're getting a probiotic and all kinds of good stuff. Learning how to make your own bread, especially a sourdough bread. Just in general, not really being dependent upon stores, not having to go to the store as much because you have large stocks of ingredients on hand rather than relying upon all of the little plastic prepackaged things. And then you just naturally cut down on your waste. And then also but there are definitely sometimes times when you will make a decision, which is not necessarily zero waste, but it is less wasteful than another thing. And that ends up being a lot of the decisions that we make for ourselves. So for instance, rubbing alcohol versus hand sanitizer. So if you take isopropyl rubbing alcohol, if you can find it. So like this whole time when everything was calmed down, pretty much every time we could, we grabbed an alcohol if we found it. And we weren't stocking up or hoarding like crazy, but we have enough alcohol in the house now to make quite a lot of hand sanitizer because you just mix alcohol 70-30 with water. So 70% alcohol with 30% water. And this is rubbing alcohol. And then you can just put it in a little spray bottle and spritz your hands, and you've got a hand sanitizer. Now you may need lotions, you may need something else because it's really hard on your hands. However, if you need it, it's there. And I actually do 75-25 because it's just easier to do 75% alcohol and 25% water. Then it's that much stronger. I usually add just a tiny bit of a liquid oil to it just to make it a little bit less drying to our hands. And then we have that on hand. We can make our own hand sanitizer until the stuff runs out. And just like a couple sprays, it really doesn't go bad, or we don't go through it very fast. And then especially with all of the dangerous recalls that have been happening with all of these new hand sanitizer brands on the market, they're deeply concerning to me. And so I don't really trust them. And so I'm very happy that we have a ton of alcohol now. And we're just going to be making our own hand sanitizer as we're moving forward with potential second wave items. So I will go ahead and quickly grab something to show you, which I think will be helpful on this ingredient thing, because I just remembered it while I was talking. So just 1 second. So if you are completely lost when I say start stocking on ingredients and not finished items, and I was mentioning things like Rice-A-Roni and Hamburger Helper, that's actually when I remembered about this book. And also even making some of your own really wonderful homemade beauty supplies, chalks, paints for your kids, Play-Doh, things like that. I would say this has to be one of my absolute favorite books, Little House Living by Marissa Alink. And you can find this on Amazon or probably at local booksellers. This book to me is worth its weight in gold. This book helped me so much with developing my own ingredient-based pantry. I found it after I had started for quite a while, but even though I had been doing it myself for quite a while with an old Betty Crocker book that's like so chauvinist, I won't even get into it. It's like from the 1950s, and all the recipes, it was like if I contributed a recipe to that book, it would have said recipe from Mrs. Adam Canuel, and there's not a single woman's name in that book. Anyway. Like my sexist cookbook from the 50s, but ridiculously informative, because that's back when women were actually taught how to do these things, and we're not taught to do these things anymore. So that's like a conversation for a whole other time. We need to bring the respectability of, homemaking and the general job of keeping house like it's a real job, and we need to bring respect back to that, whether it's a woman or, the husband or the dad staying home or whatever. Anyway, regardless, Little House Living is an incredible book, incredible resource. It teaches you how to make your own mixes. She has a lot of really great options for if you have allergies, aka if you're vegan. So if you are vegan, there's some options here, because she has like kids that can't have gluten, kids that can't have dairy or eggs, and so she's got the options in here. And so just like, for instance, randomly, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Look at the hilarious timing of this too, or like just that was the perfect thing. She has her own like Rice-A-Roni mix, rice side mix with all the ingredients that you do. And then you can build your own mixes in jars or bags and keep them in your pantry and have your own stash of ready-made meals to go on a busy night, or just to be prepped for whatever emergency, and have your meals. And then like if you took it and you put them in Mylar bags, or you vacuum sealed them in jars or whatever, they could last for a really long time. Okay, so that is it for me. I think honestly, I feel like gosh, like minimalism, even like I talked about, like there's so many things that are really important to me, and I think every single one of them funnels straight into prepping. Learning how to do skills. I feel like honestly for me, skills are the number one prep that every person should have. You cannot think that you're set just because you have a giant pantry full of stuff. You have to have skills, because like, what if you had to leave? The only thing that you could carry with you are like the clothes on your back. How would you do? Like how could you do, right? It's more important to have skills than things. So that's my opinion, and I feel like skills are the big deal, and that's why I really love knowing how to do a lot of this stuff myself and kind of make things from scratch. And like I could like show up in a kitchen somewhere and I could just cook. People are always like, give me your recipes. And I'm like, I don't really cook with recipes because I would rather know how to cook than have, be super dependent upon recipes, even though a lot of learning how to cook is based upon reading a lot of different recipes. But anyway, that's a whole other video. So we're going to cut this off now. And so thank you for watching, and hopefully you like this content. Let me know down below, what you thought, if you've got any opinions on any of this, and definitely get this book. I will link it down below. And as always, like, subscribe. As always, I hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys later. Bye.